Figured we'd start with introductions as we've been going on a little bit already, but so I can kick us off. My name is Rob. I work with CoLab. I'm finishing up my master's at MIT in city planning. I currently live in Allston in Boston.
My name is Vedette. Hello. Hi. I come from the Conservation Law Foundation, which is the organization that got funding for the research, and there my job is research. So that's pretty simple. I'm newer to Boston. I come from Columbus, Ohio. And in Boston, I live in Watertown.
I'm from South Coast Health, which is the health system here down on the South Coast. I coordinate our community outreach, what we in hospital land call community benefits. So it's kind of the hospital's investment in the community. I live in Wareham, which is down toward the Cape.
Okay, so I'm Erik. I work for Stanley Street Treatment and Resources in Fall River. We work with Mass in Motion on a Department of Public Health grant that's worked on diabetes and hypertension prevention. And my part of it is to work on the built environment, food access, environment piece of it. So I am from Fall River. I live in New Bedford currently, but I'm moving back to Fall River next year.
Hi, I'm Amy Blanchett. I live here in Fall River, in the Flint neighborhood. I am a full-time student at Bristol Community College, a general studies major, and I plan to transfer as an English major with a minor in poetry and journalism. I also am in the Flint Neighborhood Association. I serve as the treasurer. And I also work with Brown Works South Coast. Erik and I did a feasibility study in our neighborhood last year.
Hardnett Rodriguez. I'm working for Voices for a Healthy South Coast, and since Nancy retired, I'm handling this as the coordinator for now until November.
I'm Lee, and I just finished my first year in grad school at MIT for city planning, and I was doing health work before this. And I live in Somerville.
Hi, I'm Emma. Currently, I'm a summer counselor at the YMCA, a one-on-one who works with disabled children, and I'm also a counselor for kids between the ages of 5 to 6. I'm going to be starting my first year in college this fall, and I'm studying nursing at UMass Dartmouth. I'm from New Bedford.
So we're interested in just having like a little conversation about what you've heard about this project and kind of what brought you here, what made you want to be like involved in it.
So the Conservation Law Foundation is a foundation here in New England, and it was founded to do environmental advocacy. So to preserve water, the coastline, trees, birds, plants, all of those types of things. It's about 60 years old. And over time, as kind of New England got built up and became more of like a concentrated area with concentrated cities and a lot of new development, they expanded their mission to include preserving the environment for people, because people live in the environment. And so thinking about that, we began to look at the built environment in addition to the natural environment. So we do a lot to advocate for like equitable transportation. So we're talking about this whole saga about, is the train really ever going to come to New Bedford? We don't know, but that's something that we have a transportation advocate who advocates for those types of things. Dumping, environmental justice, ozone emissions, water pollutants, all those things. And so part of what we do is focus on healthy neighborhoods. And that includes all of the built environment and the way that we build housing, retail, commercial structures, green spaces, community spaces, all the physical infrastructure that makes up a neighborhood. We work to ensure that it is equitable, healthy, and fair. And so we do that in two ways. Most of the people, like 80% of the people I work with, are lawyers. And so what they do is they sue everybody all the time. So like our latest lawsuit is against ExxonMobil. And, thinking about sea level rise and, global warming and all those other things, and what will happen if they don't make the right precautions to make sure that they don't, their pollutants don't spill over into Revere and Everett and the places around there. So that's what half of the team does. And then the other half of the team thinks about markets and products. And so our goal is to, and that's where I work, our goal is to think about how can we use the way that people spend money to promote health. And so one of the first things that we created was mileage-based car insurance, right? Like one of the things we wanted to do was reduce carbon emissions and get people to walk more and get people to take public transit more. Well, how can we do that? Well, we can say if you drive less, we'll lower your premium. And so that was like a product that we created. So we help create products, some things around like solar energy, wind turbines. And then the other thing that we do is try to aggregate money and create funds. And so the Healthy Neighborhoods Equity Fund is like a pot of $30 million that is out there to provide money for architects and developers. And basically we want to provide money for developers who are looking to build projects that support the community's vision and support community health. And so all of you guys have had experience with like groundworks and public health and built environment. And so from your work, you know what the things are in the built environment that promote good health, right? Such as like what? What things?
Being have like a walkable area.
Walkable. What else?
Bike paths.
Bike paths.
Good sidewalks.
What about like with housing?
Housing that's near public transit.
Near public transit. Anything else?
Not in a food desert.
Not in food desert. What else could make your housing support your health? I think Rob gave an example of one. It's near transit and it's cheap, right? Like
affordable.
People who are not stressed about money have better health, right? So it's looking at what we did was we looked through the literature and we looked at all the best practices of what makes housing healthy, what makes green space healthy, what makes transit healthy. And we said in order for developers to use our money, they have to meet these criteria. It has to be walkable, it has to be safe, it has to be affordable, it has to be located near healthy food. If it's a retail outlet, it has to be something that is health promoting, so you can only sell healthy food. You have to pay people a livable wage, all those different things. And so we give them very, very low interest capital to build their projects. And so that was our thinking about, well, maybe we can influence the way that the real estate and development industry uses money, and it will change the built environment and create better health opportunities for people. And so we kind of have this big scorecard that has like 50 categories, and they bring in the architect brings in the plans, and a group of people from that community and a group of researchers look at it and say, they give it a score, you know? And so the question was, well, if we do all of these things, what really happens afterwards? I think, Erik, is very similar to the question that you're asking now. Like, now that this park or greenway, what are you technically calling it?
The official name is the Shannon River Rail Trail, but it is
Rail
a linear
trail.
park.
Okay. So now that the rail trail is going in, like, is it going to make a difference? The literature says it should, right? Like, all of our public health practice says it should, but how will we know what difference it makes? And that's the same question we're asking about the buildings and the housing and the open spaces that we build. Yeah, we said it has to be safe, walkable, affordable, all these other things, but how do we really know if, you know, people are experiencing that? And so that's the reason that we're conducting this study, is to say, like, one, if you attach criteria to the way people spend money and the way people build, will the resulting product actually do what it's supposed to do for people? That's one question. And then two, like, we recognize we're not the only people building stuff, right? There are people building rail trails, and there are people building condos and housing, and all of those things change the neighborhood environment over time. And when you pour more money into a community, what happens? It gets better, and then prices go up, right? The cost of food goes up. You get random things like dog groomers and like yoga studios and things that just make life expensive. And you get like Robex coffee and things that are like, whoa, you know? And so as things are improving, who does it impact? So one of the interesting things we found in the research is that a study from Atlanta showed that when they went, what is the name of that place? It used to be very popular. It's like train.
Beltline?
Mm-hmm. It's like a train station or something. I can't remember what it's called.
We don't have many of those.
I don't. But they did like all of these condos at this place where people shop. It's
Oh,
not
Atlantic
the underground.
Station.
Yes, thank you. Atlantic Station.
Station.
It's probably not a train station, but I was thinking of that.
It's
They
part of the
built,
problem.
they built all of this housing at Atlantic Station, right? And so what they did was they took an assessment of all the residents who were there before they built it. They looked at their health, they looked at their income, they looked at their education, they looked at how active they were. And then they built these new condos, and then they looked at it again in 6 months, a year, and 5 years. But they didn't track, like, if those people were the same people 6 months, 12 months, or 5 years later, right? And so, like, thinking about Rob's neighborhood, do you guys know what they're about to build in Austin? Have you heard about this? What are they building?
Lots, like Harvard's building like condos and apartments and a whole new like engineering campus.
Yeah, and then they're building like right there in Brighton, like a practice facility for the basketball team and a bunch of other things that are going in there.
And the Bruins and Celtics.
The Bruins and the Celtics, right? So you look, everybody's face is like, I know what that means. It will no longer be affordable in near transit, right? But it was a desirable location to build in because it was near transit. And so will Rod be able to stay there before he graduates? We don't know. And so the first question is like, our research questions for the study are right there in the middle post-it. Thank you, Vanna Lee. The first one is, when development occurs, existing data shows that health improves. Why? Is this because people are actually now doing something different? They're walking, they're biking, they're eating healthier food? Or is it because people who were not as healthy got pushed out because they couldn't afford it, and people who already walked, biked, and ate healthy food moved in? You know, so that's the first question that we're trying to answer. The second question is, when we look at, it's about intensity of development, right? And so there can be an area like Somerville, which apparently didn't used to look like it does. So it didn't used to have like an outlet mall and like a whole bunch of big stuff. And then they built this entire big massive complex that was like retail, condos, offices, everything. And then there are places where you might just get 2 or 3 condo buildings and an office. So does the intensity, how much development happens in a place, how does that change how people's health change? So does it take a lot of development to see a change in population and in health? Or can something small, like for instance, Erik, you said the path is how long now?
Right now it's about 0.6 of a mile.
So if the path is 0.6 of a mile, does it make a difference for when is it a different impact than when it's the entire length? And that's the same kind of question we're asking. Do 50 condos make the impact, or is it 400? Where do you really see the difference? And then the last is about people. So how does the new development actually change the lives of people who are living nearby? And this is like a huge question because there are so many theories about like what happens. Maybe it's that people feel more welcome. Maybe it's that, you know, they say parks are good for people's health because of stress. Green makes you like more peaceful and hopeful, right? Being outside, having the natural air. So is it like your perceptions? Is it physiological? Is it that when, you know, development changes, you have access to better jobs, so it's actually your income? Nobody actually knows like what mix of factors make people's health overall improve. So when you look at, you know, park interventions one-to-one, you could say, yes, people walked more. But if I walk more and my rent doubles, how do those two things play together, right? Or, you know, yes, we just opened a tropical foods grocery store, and it employed me, but I also had to move to the next neighborhood over, and now I have no one to watch my kid, or my commute is longer. So what do those things mean? Or now, Lee used to love walking, but she doesn't anymore because she almost gets run over all the time, or her bike gets hit. True story. So like all of these things that we know actually support health, how do they mediate that relationship? So those are the 3 questions, which I think very closely align to a lot of the work you've already done with groundwork and green spaces, and, you know, for you to go into nursing, these are a lot of the things that people will be dealing with when they come to their home environment. So these are the 3 questions. And so to tackle those questions, we think that the best way to answer like what happens to people is to have like people tell us, to design the questions and to ask their neighbors. And so that's why we are here.
Can you add one more thing to that?
Yes.
And maybe is explain, and this is, I know, still not quite clear, but how you see this research affecting what CLF and the plan
Oh,
does.
sure. Okay. So one of the things that we did, so I mentioned that we created this scorecard that has like 50 categories that we should measure. But this was just based on literature. It's the first time anyone's ever done this. So we just took our best stat based on the literature. We did a health impact assessment and did all this research to say, like, these are the things that we think matter. But as we learn through these surveys, like what overwhelmingly matters to people, maybe a sense of belonging or community input into a plan means more than like the form of a building or the fact that it's LED certified or LEED certified. Maybe that means more. And so what we're hoping to understand is, one, which criteria actually matter the most, and then two, in terms of like the entire practice of planning and development, how can we change the way that people design and build in communities so that it's kind of standard? Like, if we build this way, it will actually improve population health, and it's actually profitable to build it that way. And the other thing that I'll cover that you asked me to that I left out is like, so who else is involved in this research, right? So one of the things that we're doing to answer these three questions is asking you all, but we are also trying to collect data from a bunch of different sources to give us some numbers and some resonant experiences. So the other sources of data that we're looking at to determine like how people's health has changed, we could do like one of two things. So we could go out and like take spit samples from everyone and weigh everyone and like do a bunch of things like that would make people hate us, which we don't want to do. Or we could look at like all the health information that's already out there about people in neighborhoods, similarly to what you do for your community health needs assessment. And so we're gathering health information from a phone survey called the Breakfast Survey. Have you guys heard of that? Mm-hmm. So they like do a random sample, it's a national survey, and they call and say like, how many cups of green leafy vegetables did you eat in the last 4 days? So it's a phone survey that's done nationally for every county. So we're using that data. Then we're also looking at the All Payer Claims Database. Have you heard of that? All Payer Claims Database. APCD. Yes, not AB. I thought it was that for a long time. So what that means is that since Massachusetts has its own health exchange, you get your health insurance from the Massachusetts Health Exchange instead of the federal one. That means that every single person in Massachusetts has a unique ID in that database. And then every single claim that's sent in, so anytime anyone uses a payer, any type of insurance, public or private, there's a claim that goes somewhere. So there's a transaction that happens and it goes into this database. So we can look at it and say, how many people bought flu medicine? How many people bought smoking cessation patches? How many mothers had prenatal well visits? How many people went to the ER based on a pedestrian or bike-related injury? How many incidences of stroke were there? And we can attach them to individual people based on where they live. As opposed to the other phone survey, which is a random survey, and it's an anonymous survey, and it's, different people in every neighborhood, if that makes sense. So those two sources of data. And then the third source of data is just the state health department just has a bunch of data about everything that they get from a lot of different places. So we'll be using that. And then, so that's health. And then the question of development, there are three kind of really cool sources that we have. So MBTA produces these really in-depth reports about like who's riding where and, who's walking, what bus stops are being used. And so we'll use that for communities that had transit, which will be interesting down here since it hasn't come yet, right?
Well, but there is public transit
Right.
down here, so will you be approaching CERTA and?
Yeah. So we take kind of the basic universal measurements about ridership, connectivity, length of commute, things like that. We'll also take some information from what's called the development database. So when developers apply to build a project, it goes into this kind of regional database, and it just shows you like there's going to be a hotel with 50 units built at this place, and it costs this much. So it gives you the development by type and by location. So we'll look at that. And then we have this other really cool tool called the state of place, and this is looking at walkability. And so, has anybody ever done like a walk study or a walk score before, a walk audit? Of course you have. So do you want to describe what it is?
So different ways to do, I guess it's not one clear way, but basically you're going out with a number of individuals, and we did it in Fall River a few years ago through Mass in Motion. We trained senior citizens to go out and do walk audits with the idea that if you improve the infrastructure for senior citizens, that it will trickle down and be improved for everybody.
Okay.
So we trained a group. We had Walk Boston,
Mhm.
pedestrian advocacy group. They came down and they did a training about what to look for. So what a crosswalk should look like, how long a traffic signal for a pedestrian lasts versus how long it takes for a car to go by. All these different things that you wouldn't think in your normal day-to-day. And through that, through walk audits, we did probably for about 6 weeks, we did walk audits in some of the lowest income neighborhoods. And we actually got the city to change its policy because their policy previous to that was to just paint 2 striped lines for their crosswalks. Now at major intersections, they actually paint it with the piano key, like much more vibrant. And that's part of this, like the line item. So the city, anytime a new crosswalk goes in, they have to be that style. So it's getting the city to kind of shift its structure.
And with your walk audits, do you, when you kind of write everything down, do you sum it up in like a list of recommendations and points, or does it come out in a score, like a number?
We put it together as a narrative and then made a list of key recommendations that we presented to the city.
That's awesome. So what State of Place does is it was built basically on the concept of a walk audit. And if you say wanted to do walk audits for all of Fall River and New Bedford, one of the things that you might want to do when we talk about like equity and disparities is compare, right? And so that's one of the challenges with walk audits is it doesn't really give you a way to compare other than narrative, right? Or like pictures, what the difference is from one community to the other. But what State of Place does is it's kind of broken down the things that you look for in a walk audit into 200 categories. And so it looks not only at like the road ahead of you, but it looks at things like art. Or when you walk down the street, how many people look you in the eye? Are there dogs barking? Some of the more contextual things that give you a feel about how you want to interact in that place. So is it like mean like my neighborhood or nice like Lee's neighborhood? So it gives you a lot of those things. Are there flowers? Is there graffiti? A lot of other things that kind of have been linked to why people walk, and then it blends them with the physical environment that people walk in. So it gives you a score. And so the State of Place score gives you the ability to compare the state of walkability across neighborhoods. And so part of what we're thinking about in this study is like as things are built, like when a new thing goes in and they redo their sidewalk just in front of their thing, right? Like, does that create a trickle effect? Like you were saying with seniors, if it's safe for seniors, it's safe for everyone, right? So if this building builds a new thing and then they line it with flowers, will other people line it with flowers? And like how much of that actually is needed to change the score? So you can see interesting things like as you build out your greenway, does the length of it begin to spill over and things look different? And how much of the greenway does it take to change the score? So that's another source of data that we have. And so we'll blend all of that together with the data that you all collect, and we'll have a good sense of how it feels, how much it costs, what types of things are being built, and what people's health looks like at the end. Okay. I know it's a lot. Are there any questions or thoughts? And part of why we have this collective participatory group is because we'll analyze the data together. And what each community is doing is determining what does this information mean to them and how will they use it, which is why we have collabs. So they can tell you a lot about what they do, but they basically only research for the purposes of action. They don't like do research for the purposes of knowing. So they're coming alongside to help communities figure out like, what is this information useful for, and then how do we like build action around that? So for instance, like in Everett, they're really thinking about how this relates both to their community health needs assessment and to their push for like mixed income housing, right? And so this provides some evidence for them, since it's like a door-to-door survey that tracks how people are feeling about how expensive things are, what they have access to. It gives them evidence. But, another group like Dudley Street Neighborhood Initiative might really be focused on gentrification and displacement. So there's the ability for the local community to say, like, this is what it means to us and what we want to use it for. But then as an entire research team, one, it will help us make different criteria for the fund and make our dollars go further. And then, again, we do want to share it with planners, which is, another MIT urban planning, School of Urban Planning. Like, we want to help change the practices for investments, real estate finance, planning, zoning, and architecture. Great question.
Yeah.